Welcome to episode 202 of the Campus Comics Cast as we quickly overcome our muteness to bring you the first 5 appearances of Daredevil. And no, not that one. I'm Scott Reed and I'm joined by
Mike Atchison.
And on this episode, we will be discussing the first 5 appearances of the Gleason Daredevil from Silver Street Comics, and then spend some time discussing what we've been reading lately, and quite frankly, that's a lot. But first, we should probably talk about the big comic book industry news with Diamond. So if you have not heard, and I can't believe at this point if you're a comic book person you haven't heard this, Diamond has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. So, Mike, what are your first thoughts on this announcement from Diamond?
Well, surprised wouldn't be one of them.
Nope.
Chapter 11's different than Chapter 13, of course. Chapter 11 allows them to, quote-unquote, reorganize and defers payment for the people that they owe.
It's always good to remind people that Marvel Comics filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and look at them now.
Look at them now, baby.
Look at them now. Yeah. So just as a reminder.
That's a good point. And I mean, I think it was the natural course of things to happen. It just no one really knew when, and I got to give it to Diamond. They stayed the course all this time through the last 5 or 6 years. Maybe not that long, but long enough. And they keep adjusting what they're putting out there in the catalog. They were trying to be survivors, and now this is the next natural step in that process. You know, I think overall it's all going to work out for everybody, I hope. You honestly, for all of the people that were sort of like the Diamond haters for all those years, and I'm not necessarily a hater or a lover or anything. It was just they were what they were. They kind of like set the standard. They did certain things that, you got to give them credit for what they did. Now, where it goes from here, how they adjust, I guess that remains to be seen. I just hope that the people they owe money to don't have lasting damage to them.
Right. Well, we know a few things that are going to happen, at least for them to plan to happen. Most of it revolves around game distribution and then selling comics overseas. So, for example, there is a commitment from Universal Distribution to purchase the Alliance game distributor. There's also a letter that's coupled with a letter of intent to purchase Diamond UK. So basically, the UK branch of Diamond Distribution will then move over to this Universal Distribution. And they've, if you go online, I think there's 1 or 2 other things that they have mentioned that they're going to divest to try to raise some funds. One of the things that I thought was interesting was that, and I don't know if this is something that is actually an issue or not, but Lunar, who of course is the big competitor for Diamond at this point, they announced that, hey, if you put in orders for your Image comics with Diamond, you need to come to our site, reorder them so that you can get those books. And I didn't know, I didn't get the impression that Diamond was going to stop shipping anything, but I guess Image is primarily through Lunar though now, right? So I guess maybe that's what it is. Maybe Lunar's not going to ship to Diamond.
Yeah. That's sort of the way
okay.
I took it, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense all of a sudden. I guess if you talk about it long enough, you can make it make sense. So,
and then of course,
if you did put in an order from Diamond, then you had to go change that order back over. And maybe it's actually too late to do it at this point, I think. So.
Yeah. And then we know that Boom has been purchased by Penguin, right?
Maybe.
I think that
that sounds vaguely familiar.
I mean, that's a little bit older news, but I think, I mean, in the last month or two, and I think everybody was waiting on what happens now, and this is kind of part of what's happening, or why that's happening. So, um, yeah. So I
I
guess
guess the only big publisher left at Diamond would be Dynamite
Dynamite.
is like
Yeah.
the biggest. And then, it's kind of funny. I'll get a chance to get a knock on Distillery here, 'cause I never take those. But they had just switched over to Diamond, so I wonder how that's going to impact them, So,
It kind of makes you wonder what any publisher, what their thought process would be to be a new person or a new publisher to go to Diamond under when Diamond's under all this duress. That seems kind of weird for Distillery to do that.
well, they had to have offered them some type of better deal or
Must
something that
have,
they were
yeah.
getting
But still, that's
from Lunar. But yeah,
wow.
and Diamond was probably making them a good deal because they knew they needed to build their catalog.
Mm-hmm.
So, but now that's the one thing that we're losing, right? In this is the massive previews catalog, because when you compare that to the Lunar Next Phase catalog, the Next Phase catalog does not even have 5% of what is in the Diamond
Right.
catalog. It is a massive difference between the two books. So you have what, 15, 20 publishers with Lunar,
Yeah.
and then but you have hundreds,
Of the
if not thousands, of publishers and
all of those
games
small press, all of those
Mhm.
mom and pop shop deals. I mean, that one section in the previews catalog is just, I mean, that takes up 80% of the catalog.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because there's no Marvel and DC
Mm-hmm.
in the previews catalog, so it's just all the other publishers.
So,
Uh,
so what does that
Douglas
mean?
pa-
What does that
but
mean for us? Do you think, as far as how we review? I mean, this is we haven't even talked about this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So Diamond, since it's just Chapter 11, they have said that pull box is going to remain up. So all their services, nothing's changed at this point. It's just relief from creditors
Okay.
is what they're seeking.
Yeah.
So at this point, nothing's going to change. However, because of that, what we've already talked about, Lunar is probably not going to be sending Diamond Image, so you'll have to get your image book someplace else. I can't imagine. I don't would understand why anybody would be ordering image from Diamond anyway, unless they just were too lazy to ever create a Lunar account.
Mm-hmm.
So really, as of right now, nothing's really going to change, especially from the comic side. Now, if you're Diamond UK, like some of the shops you've recently done on Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow, then they're going to have to be working with a new distributor for their comics, and probably pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, but if you're US, you're probably still ordering from Lunar. So now there's a guy. His name's Douglas Paskovich. He has this comic out called Arsenic Lullaby. He put out a really nice newsletter just a couple of weeks ago, where he basically says that all the people who are cheering against Diamond are making a big mistake. And part of the reason is because of the fact that all the small press publishers, and he's a small press publisher, with his comic, they couldn't even get a shot at the Next Phase catalog. But with Diamond, and I didn't know this until I read this in his newsletter. With Diamond, all you had to do was within 3 months get your sales volume up to 1,000 issues. And if you could do that, you could stay in the catalog. If you couldn't, then they would remove you from the catalog. Now, I'm just going to be honest. I mean, I look through that catalog, and I see some titles that are in the hundreds, and it's like there can't possibly be 1,000 people ordering this book.
Right.
But apparently there are, because they have to have a certain amount of sales to have stayed in the previews catalog.
And these are sales in the U.S. or would that include?
I guess it would be. I don't know, and I don't remember him specifying what it was, but that's the reason why his book was actually able to, like he talked about it being in the like the top 100 even for a period of time, with those sales through Diamond. Which if he had to self-publish and hawk them at conventions and stuff, well, he would have never hit those numbers.
Right.
So, so I thought that was kind of interesting to know. Now, you and I have both talked to lots of comic shop owners who have just this incredible disdain for Diamond. They just they have hated dealing with Diamond for a long time. And we have some examples of that. There on smaller. I've placed orders. And I was doing the orders for Muddy Monster. I would be placing orders, and we'd have some orders sometime where the shipping cost was more than the retail price value of the books that came in that shipment.
Right.
Because they just didn't care. They wouldn't choose a lower cost method for shipping. They wouldn't hold them. They would just ship them out as soon as they got them. So I think one time we had a shipment with one comic in it, and it was like $20 shipping.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you're doing small orders like that, it's just not feasible. I remember we were down in Gulf Shores, right?
Right.
Talking to
Jason, I believe. Was it Jason?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of his shop. I forgot the name of his shop. Oh my gosh. Covert
Comics. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And he was just like, anything he could order from someplace besides Diamond, that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And Diamond's done some, under the table things. I remember there was one issue of previews where there was a short story included that was a Bad Idea comic book.
Mm-hmm.
So this would have been the first of that particular Bad Idea title that got released. Well, Muddy Monster didn't get any of their previews catalogs because they pulled those previews catalogs to send them to somebody else.
Oh my.
So it just kind of goes to show that this is a lot of this. I feel Diamond brought on themselves because they would never ever, change how they were dealing with their customers.
Yeah.
And now they over the last couple of years they've realized they need to change. Well, at this point it was obviously too late for them.
And in my experience interviewing dozens now since the big exodus of Lunar and then the Penguin Random House and etc.
Mm-hmm.
That the one consistent issue that retailers have is the shipping and the packing with Diamond.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even the customer service because they give them pretty good rankings or ratings on that. And you know what, Scott, there was one shop, one of my first ones I did, that it was just the opposite. They were so upset that Lunar split off, and they considered them to be a competitor because of their connections with Midtown and DCBS. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That they quit selling all DC products at that shop.
Oh, wow.
That's the only shop I've seen do that. Now I don't know if they stuck to it, but that was, pretty wild.
Wow, that's crazy. So
it just kind of shows you the when feelings get involved and people react, it can. Yeah, I never did understand how any potential DC customers how they would deal with that shop.
Yeah. So I mean, you got to figure out someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just driving them to DCBS or a different shop.
Right.
I mean, like you, for example, 90% of what you maybe not 90%.
Used to be like 99, and now it's more like 70 or 80, 70, 30, 80, 20 maybe. Yeah.
So it's like, can you imagine if your shop had said that? What would you do?
I'd move my whole business. I'd move completely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's anyway. That's that's their prerogative.
Away a third of your sales. Yeah. So
it'll be interesting times going forward. Yeah.
So and maybe we'll get a better comic industry, but I think what we're going to end up with, personally, if I had to place a bet, we're going to end up with a lot fewer new books in comic book shops.
Yeah.
Because I think what's going to happen is all these smaller press publishers, they're going to have to go to something like Kickstarter or Backer Kit or one of these other services to try to get their books out there, because they're not necessarily going to be picked up by a Lunar or whoever picks up this other business from Diamond. So I think we're going to see a lot fewer indie books,
Yeah.
and definitely at least for the time being. So unless Diamond can come back,
And it's kind of a shame
and
too.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
I was to say, and that's the thing is if they come back, will they still be as friendly to the smaller publishers
Sure.
as they have been in the past?
Right. Right. And when I think about Kickstarter, I think, okay, there's been some good books I've read through Kickstarter, but it's always my impetus or my driving force for going to Kickstarter was someone told me about it. Said, hey, support this
Uh-huh.
creator, support this
Yep.
title, whatever. And I do it because of that. It's not because there's
Uh-huh.
good marketing or good exposure to me as a consumer, which is something maybe I'm not looking in the right place, but I shouldn't have to look too
Well,
hard.
part of it is it's like, and I've already talked about Bad Idea at one point, but remember when Bad Idea started, they were supposed to be this complete focus on the comic book shop, right?
Yeah.
You had to, and they have basically abandoned the comic book shop, and now they are almost exclusively Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And they are, I need to unsubscribe for some of these because I get for every new book that comes out from them, from Bad Idea, I get 3 or 4 emails about it, and then usually multiple days in a row because like there has been some Matt Kent projects that were Bad Idea, so I've backed a couple of those,
Mm-hmm.
but now because I've backed one, it's like
Mm-hmm.
all of them, I get notification about. So it's excessive. So they're yeah, they're another company that's they can have my ire as well.
Well, they sold out.
So yeah, they did. So they, so much for that commitment to comic book shops.
Right.
So you got any final thoughts on Diamond there, Mike?
No, not really. I just fingers crossed. I think hopefully things work out. I mean, there's been a lot of these a lot of people talking about the end of the comic industry, and I'm sure this will fuel that fire a bit. But I still think we're in the industry itself, the whatever the medium, the creative process, whatever is still there. It's still going to be there, and there's we are legion, the fans that we are.
Yeah. Well, there we could probably stand a little bit, especially with the quantity of books, for there to be
Sure,
somewhat less quantity because some of these books, even from the major publishers, are just not quality. And I'll take a shrinking of the industry if that increases the quality that is being produced by the industry.
agreed,
So,
agreed.
so it may, even if there is even if there is some compression here, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Agreed. Sometimes I wonder, not to get off on, this is just my last statement. I mean, I was just, tonight, I was filing away. I bought a couple of old Thunder Agent comics, and it made me think about the Nick Spencer run. And I thought, well, whatever happened to Nick Spencer? I haven't seen his name anywhere. And then you wonder,
Mm-hmm.
there were some really good writers and artists that I remember from, say, 10, 15 years ago, and I don't hear about them anymore. So I think there has to be a draw for those folks to
Mm-hmm.
come back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and some of it's, some of it I'm sure is financial. It's like, well, they're doing something else that's making more money,
Sure.
so,
Yeah.
or some of them have some projects. I know, like, well, another example of this is Jeremy Hahn. So
Hmm.
Jeremy Hahn, we haven't seen his name on things in a while. Well, he has started his own line is what has happened.
I see.
So if you're interested in Jeremy Hahn, be sure you jump on his website
Yeah.
and sign up for his newsletter because he's talking about some of the books that are, and he's been spending like the last, I don't know, year getting things ready for this new set of comics, this new line to launch.
Right.
So
Okay.
there's, I don't know who it's being published under, but well, he has his own brand, I guess, for lack of a better word. But yeah, it's just, you gotta just kind of watch that
Hmm.
stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, so okay, first five. So as we mentioned, we're going to talk about the first 5 appearances of Daredevil, and not the Daredevil, the old hornhead, right? But I guess we could say the original Daredevil character.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I think you said you had a little bit of background information for us
Yeah,
on Daredevil that you want to enlighten us with.
sure. Yeah, it's certainly not enlightenment from my brain. It's just what I was able to, I could drag the net through the internet and get a few things that were interesting. Now, first of all, as a reminder, we try to kind of pick first fives sometimes with characters that have an anniversary year. I did a little searching and I found that Daredevil is is celebrating its 85th anniversary, having premiered in 1940. And like Scott said, he premiered. The publisher was Lev Gleason Publications in Silver Streak Comics numbers 6 through 10 from July of 1940 until March of 1941. Those were the first five appearances. Now, like many titles back then, it was an anthology, so you had half a dozen at least other characters that had their own 8 to 16 page story in the book. Now, Daredevil was retroactively established into the Image universe in the 1990s as its first character, which I found to be interesting. I don't know how that affects. I guess that's they've got some copyright that they can. No one else can probably publish Daredevil now, but yeah. So there's up until then though,
Mhm.
we had later appearances from since the 40s where he was renamed. It's not that they didn't have a copyright or it wasn't that he wasn't public domain, but the same name as the Marvel Comics Daredevil, he had to be renamed in the stories that he was in. So you had Red Devil in the 1980s AC Comics. You had Double Dare in Roy Thomas's Alter Ego miniseries in First Comics, and then you had the death, even in the Image. This is an Image. The death-defying devil in
Mhm.
Image's Project Superpowers, which was by Alex Ross and Jim Kruger and all. Um, so the history of the character: he was created by Jack Binder. I'm sorry, Jack Bender. I even looked up the pronunciation. Now, who do you think Jack Bender might be related to? Does that name sound
Oh, I
familiar?
would I could I say Auto Bender?
Yes. Ding, ding, ding.
Very
Yeah, Otto
nice.
Bender, who's known for being a co-creator of Supergirl and a lot of the Superman mythos. Otto Bender, he was also involved in a lot of the Fawcett comic characters. But interesting enough, these stories, I don't know if you noticed his name on there, but these stories that we read in preparation were drawn by Jack Cole of Plastic Man fame. And he was even, he was Jack Cole. I don't know if he had any process or any role in the plots, but he, yeah, we'll get into the story differences from first story on, but um, and then lastly, the Silver Streak Comics is the name is where that name comes from. Silver Streak, which was the lead feature in the comic, and he was preceded only by the Flash as a speedster by 2 months, and he was created by Joe Simon and Jack Bender. So yeah, it's it was an interesting research project, but the stories are very typically Golden Age.
Yes. Oh my gosh, are they ever? So, and apparently the writers have short memory.
Oh
So,
my God, I don't know that they cared. They were like, yeah,
yeah. Or it's like, nah, that doesn't work for us anymore. Let's just move on and do something else. So, all right. So, Mike, what was your first introduction to the character of Daredevil?
well, to be honest, it was only in previews catalogs. I, whoever was, advertising him, it might have been Dynamite, it might have been Image, it might have been someone, but it's been some years I've seen him as a character. And then, of course, later I did purchase the 8 issue Project Superpowers series, which, by the way, I decided to read as a sort of an encore to our reading for Daredevil. What
Okay.
about you?
Well, for me, I think, and I was digging around just to kind of confirm this, but the image of Daredevil that stood out for me was an Eric Larson drawing. So as
Mm.
far as I can tell, Image did some reprints of those Silver Streak comic stories with Eric Larson covers on them. And I remember maybe seeing those on the shelves whenever they came out. Now, this is probably the first time that I've ever actually read Daredevil, this version of
Yeah,
Daredevil,
same.
in an actual story. But I remember seeing him in those reprint books, which were I've got one pulled up on eBay, but I can't remember. I can't see when it actually came out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So this actually says 2009. So um, I guess that's a possibility. So
Yeah, that was about the time that I think that the superpowers came out. That was in 2008.
okay.
But
So well, this one was like Silver Streak number 24. So I'm assuming they were probably reprinting these
mm,
up to 2 years prior to this. So maybe
hmm
it was 2007 that this actually started. So, and I think a lot of it has to do with. I think Eric Larson has a pretty strong love for a lot of Golden Age characters.
hmm
At least he, acts like he does.
hmm
So I think this is one of those characters that he, got reintroduced, and as you mentioned, is in as a regular in Savage Dragon, I think. So
yeah, yeah. One thing I did learn
uh,
also reading was that Peter Cannon,
mhm.
which I don't know if the homage, his costume was very similar. You had that sort
Yeah.
of opposing top and bottom and left and right and whatever. That I'm just going to read verbatim. A similar earlier homage came in DC Comics' Kingdom Come series when Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, a character whose regular costume was inspired by Daredevil's, according to Peter Morisi, wore a new costume very similar to that of the Golden Age Daredevil. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I again, I don't know if that even makes a whole lot of sense what I got there, but I can see that now. I didn't really think of it before, and there's I love homages anyway, so I had to throw that out there.
So what are your initial thoughts on this version, the Silver Streak 6 to 10 version of Daredevil?
I put one word here. Yikes.
Yeah.
The honestly, the first issue was like, oh my goodness. I'm glad it was only 8 pages.
hmm
Um, it it was so tropey and of the
hmm
time, even for the time, and some things. I mean, in the first issue, he was mute, and
hmm
there were his power set, starting at the beginning was a boomerang, and his origin was
Yeah. Yeah. Here, let me just read the
yeah.
origin.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Orphaned by thugs who ruthlessly killed his parents. Does that sound familiar?
Right.
And left him speechless by the torture they inflicted on him. Bart Hill grew into manhood, possessed with the determination to destroy the forces of crime and evil. So, and yeah, so they make it a point, like, to give like a little blurb here. Gosh, I want to. Where is that at? Oh, note: since the Daredevil cannot speak, the artist has indicated thought balloons to show you what goes on in his mind.
Yeah, I have that same note that they constantly were reminding you that they would use an adjective that to remind you that he was mute.
Yeah.
Our speechless hero, or our mute such and such. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you're kind of pounded in the head, and I think, well, we'll get to that, but eventually they got tired of trying to work around that little plot
Yeah.
device.
Well, it didn't take very long at all.
No, no. In the first issue, he had a pale yellow and dark blue. He did have the spiked belt, but his color scheme
hmm
was definitely different. And
Yes.
yeah, so
Yeah, it's kind of like it makes you wonder why they changed something like that so dramatically. It's like maybe they should have just, if they didn't like this concept of the character, maybe they should have just taken what they wanted to change and come up with a new character.
it seems like I read. Now I didn't write this down, to help me remember, but I want to think that Jack Cole did have more to do with the writing after the first story and the plotting or whatever, and maybe initiated some of those changes, seeing that the you know some of the aspects weren't all that great. Maybe.
Right. Right. Well, I didn't think the first issue was any worse than any of the other ones. Myself, anyway.
Yeah.
But that,
Yeah.
yeah, for me, at least after the first issue, other than the muteness, this was a pretty straightforward Mystery Man character
Hmm.
from the Golden Age. I mean, no superpowers, just got money and some little gimmick, because it didn't take as much to excite, the reader at the time, for some mindless entertainment, and there wasn't as much competing against, the attention, so they could actually do a little less and get away with it than what they can do now. So,
Yeah, and the antagonists were typical of the time. They were just thugs. They were mobsters or
hmm
whatever. That changes next issue as well.
yes, yeah. So, Mike, how much did you know about Daredevil? Or actually, hold on. How much do we know about this character's origin from the first 5 issues? Anything that you think's as you'll have to answer this one because I haven't read anything
Hmm.
beyond these 5. Anything that you think's been forgotten, changed, retcon that you know of?
Well, I'd say the majority of what changed happened after issue 6 of Silver Street Comics. That's when the uniform change went from pale yellow and dark blue to the uniform we know now, the dark red and blue. Being mute, as I alluded to earlier, that went away without an explanation. Maybe it was since it was psychological. Maybe he got over it. Um, but the powers mostly stayed this, or powers such as they weren't superhuman powers.
Abilities,
Yeah,
yeah.
abilities. They stayed the same. The boomerang. I mean, in the first issue, the boomerang was unbelievably powerful because you've seen one scene where it took out the propeller of an airplane. So and I'm not sure exactly how boomerangs work, but I don't think if they actually strike their target, they're supposed to come back. They
No.
they just fall, you know.
As a fan of Captain America, there's not a whole lot that I can say about that. So I'm gonna let that lie. You know.
I understand. Yeah.
Just yeah.
Yeah, we can suspend disbelief for that.
And that I could accept just because of for
Sure.
other reasons.
Okay. So in 1943, though, this creator named Charles Biro rewrote Daredevil's origin in issue 18 of Daredevil comics. By that time, he'd got his own title. He became that popular, and he gave him a new name of Bill Hart instead of what was the first one? Bart
Oh,
Hill.
I didn't even write it.
It was very similar.
Bart Hill.
Bart Hill,
Yeah,
yeah.
Bart Hill. Bart Hill. Yeah.
And giving him a little bit more quote unquote believable origin as having been raised by Aborigines in the Australian outback, not just somehow training himself to use a boomerang. This always reminds me of the Black Condor origin. That was a quality hero. He was literally raised by condors. Even taught him how to fly. That was the best part. You could be taught how to fly. But yes, that was the biggest changes. In the early years. But you know what? Going on past that, he actually didn't change much. In fact, in Project Superpowers, I don't know if he can't speak or he chooses not to, but he doesn't speak.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe they went back to the original version of the character.
Yeah, and they didn't have
I
to.
know.
Yeah.
I saw just as I was trying to find, like the issue of Image Comics where I remember the cover for Daredevil. I saw where in Image, let's see if I can. They basically he had been in some type of suspended animation or something for the Savage Dragon version
Oh.
of Daredevil now, so he doesn't age. So that's like one of the changes that they made for the character in Savage Dragon just to keep him around.
Well,
So
he's also unaged in Project Superpowers, but it's
okay.
for a different reason, which I'll get to in the What We've Been Reading segment,
Ah, okay. All right. Sounds good.
if I remember to. But yeah, that's Yeah, I thought that was interesting that he. Now, that's just in the. There was 3 volumes of Project Superpowers. I only read the first volume, so maybe he ended up speaking in later ones.
Well, so what powers does this character display in these issues? I think we've kind of already talked about that with the character's origins and ability, but you know, he's got money and
Hmm.
he uses a boomerang.
Yeah,
That's kind of about it.
yeah, he's.
I guess there's the vehicle that shows up in um, one of these other issues. Um,
Oh, I didn't even
but
remember that,
yeah,
but yeah.
oh yeah, he has. There's of course he's got to have a vehicle.
Well, yeah, of course. He's athletic, got reflex. He's got all those, non-super
Hmm.
powered abilities. Acrobatic.
Hmm.
He definitely they accentuate the acrobatic part of him. I mean, um, but at the end of the day, he can he can wield that boomerang not like no one else. Yeah.
Right, right, yeah. I mean, he's a traditional pulp hero or mystery man character
Hmm.
with the boomerang stick as opposed to the bat stick or the you know insert any of these you know
Yeah.
golden age characters into that mold.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's amazing to me how quick some of these characters came out. Post Superman and
Oh
Batman.
my gosh,
It's
isn't
just
that
like
the
yeah,
truth?
yeah.
They must.
It
Yeah.
didn't take them very long.
No.
Of course, I guess when you've got eight different artists, eight different creators, only having to do 8 pages, to get a book out,
Sure.
then you got the whole uh, shop set up there going.
And that's what they
It's a
had
little bit
back
easier
then.
to
They
do
had
that.
shops. They
Uh-huh.
had, you know, I don't want to say a bullpen, but they had like all
Yeah.
these. They could go to the Iger Studios or, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah. Any several of those that were out there. So just hey, we need a comic for this.
right.
So, all right. So let's see. What moments? All right. So what moments in these first 5 issues do you want to call out? So I'll let you go first.
Can I forgot to mention one thing about how close
Oh,
this he
sure.
matches the Daredevil of
Oh,
today. One thing I noted is that besides being mute again or not speaking at least, he and being Bart Hill instead of. Oh yeah,
hmm.
he went back to being Bart Hill instead of
Oh,
Bill Hart. Oh my gosh. But he's depicted in, and I think I said Image earlier. It's Dynamite that put out that book.
this
Um,
Project Superpowers.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about
Okay.
that. He's depicted way too bulky and muscular. Now I don't know if that's stayed or not, but he's supposed to be acrobatic. He's supposed to be more of a slender hero. So anyway, if we're
Oh, okay.
digging for differences, that's one I noticed.
So, well, one of the big things, and we've kind of already talked about this, but they make such a big deal out of his muteness in the first issue, and immediately in issue 7, that is 100% gone.
Yes.
So it's just to me, it's just like why? It's just I don't understand that. It's kind of that kind of threw me for a loop. Um,
Well,
and then I guess go ahead.
I just think it was harder work. I honestly think it was that somebody decided,
Yeah.
this is I'm not doing this. I'm not trying to ride around this little thing here, and
Well, it's like when uh, Simon and Kirby got threatened by DC because of Captain America's shield, because there was already the Guardian. Is that right? At DC,
he did have a shield,
that
totally different
that had
shape.
a
Yeah. Oh, maybe
yeah,
they
but it
maybe
wasn't. But see, the original Cap
that's
shield,
right. That's right.
and then they changed it to the circle, and
Yeah.
Kirby was like, I don't care. It's easier to draw the circle.
Right.
He was actually glad for the change, I think. So
It's much more iconic. I never did like that Guardian. I didn't really even like the Guardian character and never have been appealing to me.
I think whenever he was in oh gosh, he was used in. Oh, it was the Young Justice. Yeah, the HBO Max Young Justice series. He
Oh.
was used in that series pretty well. I kind of liked him there. Of course, a lot of that stuff was written by Peter David,
Well,
so
he's a cop to
he was
put
actually
on.
pretty good.
Yeah, he's a cop to put on a uniform to be a
Yeah,
vigilante, and
yeah.
It's just
there it was he had moved up to guarding like this I'm not going to spend time on it, but it's one of the high tech agencies. He was a guard
oh, I see. Yeah,
for their stuff
yeah.
there. So yeah, it kind of changed it a little bit there.
But we digress.
What's something that you want to pull out here?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think those thought balloons that you were talking about, whenever in issue 6 as a mute, they were a dashed line, not the sort of cloud looking with little cloud dots going to the speaker's mouth. It was just a little bit. I think it was just the whole idea of a thought balloon was new back then.
Hmm.
Uh, oh, I know a big thing. I mean, with issue 7, not only do all those things change with his
Mm-hmm.
character, he graduates to headliner in the book. Or I'm sorry, he graduates to he go up against as an antagonist. The main headliner of the book before was the Claw. So
Okay.
they shared longer stories then, from at least 7 through 10. I mean, the Claw was, your stereotypical character with Asian bad guy, with long
Mm-hmm.
claws and yellow skin and just, really bad, but it was of the time. and
Yeah. Right.
and this is where I seen that the art was being done by Jack Cole. And aside from what I just said, it was really good art. I mean, I think Claw was a really freakishly scary character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of the plot was outlandish, but the visuals were cool. And yeah, I liked Claw as a villain, and I liked having the longer stories, and they carried over from one issue to the next too.
Now they, to my knowledge, they never explicitly said that the claw. Obviously, it was clearly implied, but they never explicitly said that the claw was Asian, right? Because they talk about him being, like the hate god and some things along that lines, as
Right,
opposed to.
right. But his
But
lackeys were
so
also very
yellow
his.
skinned
Yeah,
and yeah.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Whatever. I mean, the only other thing I had about things that really stuck out to me was on pay or on in issue 8. There was a panel or two with the president, which was they drew it definitely to be similar to FDR. The profile, I
right.
think maybe he had a cigarette holder, things like that, who was under a trance by Claw and was, putting out all these executive orders to take over the country.
Right. Now, I was thinking that in issue 6 it wasn't, because it becomes the yellow claw, but in issue 6 it's the green claw.
Oh gosh, I don't think I even
Cuz
noticed that.
yeah. So, yeah, in issue 6, and I didn't read that, and if I wouldn't have happened to have just saw this, because it says the green claw literally rises from the dead, and it's up
Yeah.
to Carl Durant to investigate. However, the claw uses hypnotic powers on the Major, and he is shrunk and placed in a box to die, while the claw readies an army of robots to conquer the armies of the Earth. So I guess green goes to yellow, and mute goes to talk, and all's right with the world. I don't
Nobody
know.
will know. Nobody will remember.
That's right. Who'll even notice? So it was, to me, what was kind of weird is I really felt like the Daredevil stories weren't as much about Daredevil as they were about the Claw. It's like
Correct.
they featured the
Absolutely.
Claw,
Yeah.
and he just happens to appear just to be his foil. It's like they could have stuck any
Yep.
character in there. 'Cause I think the Claw, honestly, was a whole lot more interesting than Daredevil
He
was.
sure was. Yeah. I mean, I think that was why he was the headliner. I mean, maybe Silver Streak had some early. Maybe he was in the front of the book, but I think the Claw was who the Silver Streak was always up against.
Okay.
So, and that's the if you tried to name one thing that was consistent throughout all these issues, it would be the Claw.
And it's kind of weird at this time to think about, really the main the main character in these books was the bad guy, not the good guy. So
Right. Right.
okay, we got to talk about the absurdity of Daredevil going on vacation. And I'm trying to remember if this was in 8 or 9, but Daredevil goes on vacation. While he's on vacation, the Claw shows back up. At some point, Daredevil then shows up on the Claw's island
Mm-hmm.
and is captured and burned alive. And we learn that that wasn't actually Daredevil. That was Daredevil's brother who tried to fill in for him and obviously failed miserably. So we had somebody burned at the stake that ended up, not being involved in the story at all, so he could pop back in later on. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I had
so
to.
that's definitely one of those absurd golden age
It
storylines
was
there.
absurd. Yeah. I mean, you're like, oh, this didn't really happen. I mean, clearly because this character carries on for years to come, but
Yes.
I did not see the whole idea that it was his brother that actually did
Yeah.
die, burned on the stake. So I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. And of course, I don't think they had ever mentioned he had a brother prior to uh, the brother showing up in the costume.
Yeah.
So I think they were like, "Oh, how do we write ourselves out of this jam?" I know. It's like those that Commandi challenge where they try to end a story with the most ridiculous thing, so that the next writer has to figure out a way to get out of it. So
Yeah.
I think that's what happened.
So there.
You got any other moments you want to talk about in these issues?
Not really, because I mean, it's like you said in the beginning. This kind of scant. There's more.
Hmm.
It's interesting because it's a golden age character, but it's also interesting that he's been revived in the modern era, along with a lot of other public domain golden age characters to some
Hmm.
good effect, I think. But
Right.
as far as those stories back then, yeah, it's not like I'm gonna go get the Daredevil in the Golden Age omnibus. I'm not.
No,
No.
no, definitely not. So, um, do you have a particular favorite issue out of these?
Oh, yeah, 7 for sure, because that's where
7 for
I think
sure.
the opening scene, Bart Hill or Bill Hart is he's got his love interest with him. They're on this little
Yes.
picnic out by by a meadow and a creek, and it's a nice idyllic scene.
Hmm.
And I thought the art was really good in that, and it was well done. It's just and then that continued that whole that began the storyline, the 4 issue storyline against Claw. So
Claw. Hmm.
7 sticks out in my mind as being one that I actually enjoyed. I don't know how many pages it was, but it was longer than the rest, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, none of them really stand out to me. I think I put down 6 just because at that point the character was at least had something uniquely identifying them.
Yeah.
But that obviously didn't stick around. Okay, so of course I have to think that Kirby Lee, Wally Wood, when they were creating Daredevil for Marvel, they obviously had to have been influenced by this character.
Yeah.
You have the red suit, or of course it was yellow and okay, so it was yellow and red, right?
Yellow and
Okay.
blue, I believe. Yeah.
Well, no, the Marvel version starts yellow.
Oh,
You got
right,
the
right.
yellow
Yeah.
suit with a little bit
Mhm.
of red, and then it becomes the red. So you've got that similarity between the two Daredevils. They have the costume change.
Mhm.
Okay, you've got the disability, the muteness versus the blindness.
Mhm.
You've got the Billy Club versus the Boomerang.
Yeah.
You've got it's just all these, all these little similarities. So there had to have been some influence in this character's creation, uh, of the Daredevil that I know and love
Mhm.
from this particular version of Daredevil.
Yeah, I would almost. I mean, I don't know how it couldn't be, and they just changed him a bunch and needed to make him not just unique but a better character.
Right. Yeah. Well, that wouldn't take a whole lot to make him a better character than what was presented
Well, I've
here.
never
So.
read the first appearance of Marvel's Daredevil, so
Oh,
Matt
really?
Murdock. So I am curious to maybe see how that is. You know.
Okay. Well, it's while it is no incredible work of art, it is definitely better written than this. So,
Okay.
but that's faint praise, I
Yeah.
guess. Um, so, all right. So here's the big question, and you've kind of already answered this, but do you plan to seek out more stories with this character in
Yeah. Not only have I, or not only will I, but I have. And since that Project Superpowers, it was just the first volume that I read, I'm interested. And also because Daredevil's one of the more appealing characters in that story, I would be interested to read more, but I think I want to go in sort of a chronological order. In other words, read these second two volumes of the superpowers and then see where it goes from there.
it? Well, usually my answer is if I hear there's a really good story, I'll pick it up. But for once, I'm going to say no. I do not plan on reading any more of this character. I'm not really interested in that superpowers
Hmm.
line that you're talking about. I'm probably not going to go read this character in Savage Dragon. So I'm,
It's just too much
you know,
stuff
I'm
out there
just,
to have to.
yeah, just to
Yeah,
waste your time reading something that's just
I
not
get it.
particularly enjoyable,
Yeah,
So, um, so yeah, it didn't really
yeah,
stick for me.
yeah.
So
Most of the time when I answer that question, it's aspirational, not
yeah,
not something I necessarily stick to.
yeah. For once, I'm gonna have a pretty pat answer of no. All right,
Yeah.
final thoughts on Daredevil.
I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we got in a really old, relatively unknown
Hmm.
character to talk about. So um, I'm pretty sure this was not anticipated by anyone that we were going to cover the first five appearances of
That's
the Love
it.
Gleason Daredevil.
There you go. So, I guess, and since this character is in the public domain, these first few issues you can actually read, online. I think technically legally.
Yeah,
For free. So something to think about if you do want to just give it a shot and see what you think
my best luck
of
has
the Love
been with
Gleason.
Digital Comics Museum for those Golden Age stories. So
Okay. Yeah, I actually read it on a site called comicbookplus.com. So,
yeah, okay.
all right. So, what we've been reading. So,
What have
now
we been
Mike
reading?
and I talked, and one thing that we're going to do, we're going to save this, something that we both have read, was New Gods #1. That's the new Ram V series. And we decided we're going to save that to give it its own discussion slot. So if you want to read along with us, something that we're going to be reading,
Hmm.
then be sure you pick up New Gods 1, and who knows, maybe we'll have two in our hands by the time we get around to recording that episode. Maybe we can talk about the first two instead of just the first one. Um, so Mike, I say we just says I know we both since we both have plenty of things that we've been
Yeah.
reading so far this year.
Do
So
you want to tell?
in case
Did we tell the
no,
readers
you
last
go ahead.
episode? Or
You go.
okay, so
We talked about it, but go ahead.
yeah, okay. So Scott and I decided to both of us to take on that as a New Year's comics related resolution to take on the 500 book reading challenge for the year. And I didn't know Scott was going to do this, but sure enough, he did. He started messaging me starting on January 1st what books he's read, and then an ongoing total. Uh, and I thought, oh, that's cool. So here we have for the last almost 3 weeks. We've been going back and forth,
It
and
actually is 3 weeks
it
because
is.
today's the
Yeah,
21st,
that's
so it's
right.
three
Yeah.
weeks today. So yeah,
So yeah, that's I think that's it has the intended effect of having us read more, and it's just it's funny because it's not meant to be competitive, but I find myself going, wait a second, he's like 6 books ahead of me. I need to do some reading. So yeah, it's been and to that end where we've I think at least two of the things I put on that list were on the what we've been reading segment. I have ready to talk about. And I
cool.
think I got 5 things overall if we go back and forth, or we can do less.
Okay. Well, trying to get my, even though it doesn't really matter for the podcast, I'm trying to get my webcam to actually focus in on me. So, but
Yeah.
I'll worry about that later. Now we can do. I mean, we can do this for as long as we have time,
Okay.
because we both obviously have plenty too. This was actually the whole 500 comics was Mike's comic book New Year's resolution, and I decided I was just going to piggyback on that. So I thought, well, I'll see what I can do. So that was actually Mike's thing, and I'm
There
just
you go.
tagging
Yeah.
along for the fun. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so Mike, why don't you go first? Tell me what you got, what you want to talk about.
Okay. So, okay, first of all, I want a disclaimer here. When you read A, this many books, and B, when it might be weeks between recordings, you kind of like forget some of the plot. If you don't take the notes right away, and they're like, which ones am I going to cover? And I have to go back and kind of like review. I do a flip through of the issue or the trade or whatever, and might want to mark that spot. So my first issue is one I just read last night, in fact, and it's the facsimile edition of Moon Knight #1, published in 2022, but it was originally out in 1980, written by Doug Munch, and art by Bill Sienkiewicz. Um, it's just the one issue. That series went on like 38 issues, I think, but the one that I read I liked it enough. I thought I'm going to cover this on my turn. It's not the first appearance of Moon Knight. We know that happened in 1975's, what is it, Scott?
Werewolf by Night 32.
Man, this guy's on the money every time, which goes for probably anywhere from like $1,500 to $6,000, depending on condition. And this doesn't go for nearly as much, but it still pulls in a pretty good price. So the name of the story is The Macabre Moon Knight. And when I first seen the cover in the catalog when it was being solicited, I was like, oh man, I love this cover. And when you look at it closely, it's I don't know that I knew it was Bill Sienkiewicz. It looked a lot like Jerry Bingham, maybe even Neil Adams. And it's not the Sienkiewicz of the later in the 80s, when you start doing that
The
more
New Mutants.
the New
The
Mutant
Mutant
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Nothing like that, but really, really good. So I think that's what grabbed me. But it's not it's an origin story, but not the first appearance. So basically, the story is Moon Knight recalls his origins as a mercenary and how he became Moon Knight after receiving the powers from the Egyptian god Khonshu.
Khonshu.
There we
Khonshu.
go. Okay. I was trying to remember how to pronounce that, but before being Moon Knight, Mark Spector was the right-hand man of a mercenary named Raoul Bushman. And during a raid on a rebel camp in Sudan, Spector and his buddy Frenchie, they sort of have a crisis of conscience and decide to quit working for Bushman and ultimately oppose him in the looting of a sacred tomb for its gold. So in the process, and while still pretending to be with Bushman, Spector prevents the archaeologist that found that tomb from stabbing Bushman in the back. He was trying to defend the tomb. But this has kind of like disastrous effect. He saves Bushman because he didn't want to see him die. Then Bushman turns around and kills the archaeologist. Well, that of course upsets the archaeologist's daughter, Marlene, and she becomes a bigger player in the story. And anyway, as the archaeologist died, he asked Spector to find Marlene so he can protect her from Bushman. And despite her initial anger with him for doing whatever he did to lead to her dad's death, she trusted Spector. After seeing, I guess, the plans that of Bushman's to execute a bunch of innocent villagers, Spector finally had enough and attacks Bushman. But he quickly loses and is taken to the desert, dropped off to die. He's found by two Arab men a day or so later, and I guess they've got Marlene on speed dial for some reason because she's the daughter of an archaeologist, and they carry his body into the tomb of the pharaoh Seti. And at first, Marlene's happy to see him dead, but then realizes Spectre, he probably saved her life, and in doing so, has given his own life, and she felt bad. And this is, I gotta quote this, Scott. I thought this was so funny. She says, this, it's said in the script, in the dialogue, and saying all that, and then she says, he was handsome, as if that's the main reason why he shouldn't have died.
Yeah.
So suddenly, then he's under the shadow of this Khonshu. Spectre sits up, and he's not sure who he is, but he does know the idol in front of him is Khonshu, the god of the moon, and the quote unquote the taker of vengeance, a figure of terror. He puts on the idol's cloak, which I didn't know idols had cloaks, but he takes this white cloak and he kind of makes a makeshift Moon Knight cape and whatever, and becomes that, takes on that persona as the moon's knight of vengeance. And he goes on, he takes Marlene's Jeep, didn't ask her for the keys. I guess she just left him in the Jeep. I don't know. He goes to exact his vengeance, but Benjamin, or Bushman, got away. So Marlene eventually learns that it was Bushman that killed her father, not Spectre. The story sort of like quickly like tells the rest of the story. It tells that fleshes out the whole becoming of Moon Knight. He becomes a millionaire because one of his alter egos, which he has two or three, is a stock investor, and he makes his first million that way. He's also a costume crime fighter. He's
Taxi cab driver.
taxi cab driver, right? Yeah, and
And
he has Frenchie and Marlene at his side as his team. And then, like a 4 or 5 page epilogue, Spectre. It's basically the return of Bushman. Spectre finds out that Bushman's in New York now, and he finds the base of operations and nearly beats him to death in a fairly vivid scene for 1980. I thought that was well done. Not necessarily because it was gratuitous or anything, but it was just a very violent scene and showed his emotion and anger. But he leaves him alive, and the police arrive, and they find his calling card, which is like his version of a batarang. It's like the silver crescent stuck in the windowsill, and it casts like its shadow across the image of the incapacitated Bushman. So I love this, man. I just love this story. It is in some ways like very, it shows shades of Batman. You got the Master of Disguise, the Playboy millionaire, etc. But I just thought it was unique enough, even for the time, to be really a good story and something I liked. And it didn't hurt that Sienkiewicz was channeling his inner Adams, Neil Adams, for this story. So 2 thumbs up for me on that one.
I think that issue, that Moon Knight #1, was Marvel's first direct market comic.
Oh,
That
really?
went straight to comic shops. Yeah, I think that was part of the appeal of that book, was that it was a direct market book.
Well, that would
So,
have been of that era. Yeah.
hmm
Cool.
yep, and you start to see as those as that progresses, where you start to see Sienkiewicz changing his styles. You get these scenes where Moon Knight's doing some action down a hallway and his body's really elongated, and you start to see that, which I know I'm in the minority on this, but I'm not a big fan of that. So I like my art a little bit more, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
Yeah,
traditional and yeah.
traditional. Yeah, he starts kind of traditional and then moves that way, and
Now, I'll
that's
say that my first exposure to Sienkiewicz's art was as a cover artist. So it was unique and new enough to me. I thought, oh, this is great. Seeing Batman like this, this is really,
yeah.
abstract. And,
Oh yeah,
oh, yeah, I dug it.
like that. What was it? Batman 400. I think he
Yes,
did the good
he
cover
did.
for.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yes.
I love that.
All right. Well, the first book. Are you done?
I am.
Sorry. Okay. So the first book that I'm going to talk about, and one of the main reasons why I'm going to talk about this book is because I really need to get it posted up on eBay, um, and I don't want so I can't just sit there and leave it in my stack. But I have Mark Spear's Monsters #1. Okay, and this is a book actually from Keenspot. It is not a publisher that I order a lot of books from, but in 2023, when I had my local comic show, I invited Mark Spears to this show, and he graciously attended. Was an awesome guy to meet and talk to. I got a Spawn sketch from him because at the time he was doing a lot of covers for Spawn, and he's since, you see his name if you go through the catalogs. His name shows up on lots of books, but now he has this Mark Spears Monsters series. So basically, it is about a monster hunter, and what's bad is I have already forgotten the name of the monster hunter. That's terrible of me, but this is one of the first things I read since we started tracking our readings, and I was looking to see if I could see it here real quick on one of these pages. Oh, the Slayer. So he's named the Slayer. He basically has this dark suit with red eyes and this big giant, almost sombrero looking hat. But he's been around for a long time fighting monsters. There's a scene where they go back to 1896 and they are able to defeat Dracula, who's a very, very Bela Lugosi version of Dracula. It moves from color scenes to black and white to grayscale. I think one thing that people are really digging about this series are all of the covers. So like the A cover for issue number 1 is a Boys number 1 homage where you have
Oh,
all
it
of
is,
the
yeah.
monsters, all the monsters looking down. I wasn't for sure what Mark Spears' process was for how he drew, because like I said, I've only seen him draw like a sketch cover. So he actually posted on Instagram not too terribly long ago, but what he will do is he will make an initial sketch to kind of get the how things are going to look, and then what he does is he models it in a 3D program,
Oh,
and then tweaks the models, and then paints the models all digitally. So it's all a digital. This is all a digital. It starts with like a sketch, and then it goes all into a all digitally created. But like on a, I don't know if this actually has it in here. Yeah, there were a ridiculous number of covers for this first issue, and I hesitate to even open this up too much, but just to kind of give you an idea, Mike,
oh my
there are
goodness.
covers A through T listed here. Now, some of them are the same cover, just with variations. But he has an Infinity Gauntlet homage. He has a Hulk 340 homage. He's got some. He has multiple Todd McFarlane like Spider-Man number 1 homage. There's a Star Wars homage cover. There's
Oh my
a
gosh.
Hulk 181. There's an Amazing Spider-Man 129. He's got an homage to like just the old EC Comics covers. So I mean, it's just an incredible amount of covers that he does for each of these.
Man.
But so I only ordered this because I got to, he came to my show. I got to meet him. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give this book a shot. And I am so happy that I ordered like 8 copies of it.
Yeah.
Because I think I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago that I had those books were going for $150. Well, I just sold my second issue after I'd sold the first one, and the second issue got $250.
Holy
So
cow.
that book is super hot right now. So thank you, Mark Spears, for coming to my show and being a great guy so that I would order your book, multiple copies of your book, and reap some benefits from that.
Nice.
So,
And he was at Metropolis at the Superman Festival, right? Or
and
celebration.
yeah, so after what's funny is after he left my show on his way home, he lives in I think he lives in Huntsville, Alabama, or at least in that vicinity.
Yeah.
And he on his way home, I said, "Well, you need to stop at the Superman Museum on your way back through." And he did, and then he talked to some of the people who were in charge of the Superman celebration, and they actually had him at they had him come to the Superman celebration in 2024. So he's at my show in
Right.
2023, and then at Superman celebration in 2024. So, but he is super popular right now. So,
That's great.
yep,
Yeah, he seemed really
Which-
great meeting him there.
yep, good, really good guy.
Okay. You ready for me?
Yeah, I'm ready for you.
Okay, as mentioned earlier, I read Project Superpowers, the first volume, which is 8 issues long, 0 through 7, back in the day when you always had to have the obligatory 0 issue. And it's written by Jim Kruger, and you had Alex Ross as the co-plotter and who did covers. And on interiors, you had Doug Klauba and Carlos Paul on pencils, and then Steven Sadowski on inks. And basically, the premise here is that you have a number, actually a very large number, of Golden Age superheroes who are resurrected into the modern age. Most of them, I only say most because that's my research said there were some that weren't. I don't know who they are, but most of them are in the public domain, including the protagonist, the Fighting Yank. He was one of those fairly common patriotic heroes from the World War II era. And like I said, it's first of 3 volumes, and the last one was published in 2018 and 19. So the story is set in the present day, and it's kind of implied that the absence of all of the world's heroes allowed the United States to become a virtual dictatorship with the Dynamic Forces Corporation, which is sort of the villain of the piece here, manipulating world events for the sake of order and profit.
What was the name of the
The
organization?
Dynamic Forces?
That's the people who do all the sign books.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I kind of like that. I kind of think it's kind of funny.
Okay, all right. Sorry, go ahead. That just threw
So,
me.
yeah, no, it's like that's the corporation, but you got Dynamic Man and you got Dynamic Kid and Dynamic Woman, all that stuff. It's the whole family thing. But they also have this police corps, which consists of armored officers that are basically RoboCops. Before there were RoboCops, they were brutal and exacted their own judgment. Um, Wars were being waged for nothing other than business reasons. Free speech is heavily restricted. And in addition to all this, a terrorist movement called the Claw, sound familiar? May or may not be related to the Golden Age villain of the same name, is active around the world, except as a terrorist movement. And it's into this setting that these heroes are you know, they're emerging again.
Introduced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
introduced. Yeah. So back in the 40s and 50s, maybe the late 40s, early 50s, the Fighting Yank imprisoned most of the other heroes in something called Pandora's Urn, which is a take on Pandora's box, so that he found out back then that that's the only way that he could imprison evil. He didn't get their consent. They didn't like that. And basically, the only way they could be released is if he himself broke the urn, again. He found out that he needed them again to fight evil, which somehow remained no matter what. He does break the urn 60 years later, and the heroes are all kind of slowly appearing across the world. Almost all of them are like immediately knew that he did this, and they're totally ticked at the Fighting Yank. Now remember, also the Fighting Yank is sort of, I don't know if this was part of the canon, but he's got the ear of his great 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 whatever grandfather who was a Revolutionary War soldier who sort of died in shame, so he's trying to relive his glory through his great 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 grandson. And so I don't know if that was the way it was back in the 40s, but that's the way it is shown here. So without really getting into this long story, I'm just going to go through some pros and cons. I really like that there was Golden Age heroes, even the corny ones, and Alex Ross covers. Really, only he can make any character look good. Um, the downside is for interiors, anybody but Alex Ross seems to be a disappointment. I don't really know this Klauba gentleman or Carlos Paul. I do know Sadowski. He used to do some pencils on JSA, and I really liked his work, but I never really seen him as an inker only. So uh, there were a lot of heroes. I like that. Goofy powers being updated, better uniforms, all that being updated. The dynamic man of the Dynamic Forces Corporation. He was very much a nihilist, and that was very well done. Now on the downside, Kruger's plot. Well, first of all, his dialogue is it's very verbose. I'm not always a fan of that. there's a limit to how much that is good. The plot was a bit disjointed, hard to follow, but it got better as you went. Really, the last 2 or 3 issues were much better. Um, so yeah, so that's my take on Project Superpowers. It could have been done a little bit better, but I'm hoping that the next volume does get better, and I'm going to continue reading it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad reading Silver Streak 6 through 10 wasn't a complete waste for you.
No, I was like, I was like, when I seen, when we talked about doing Daredevil, I know I've got that character's in Superpowers. I've got to dig that out as an encore, and it worked out. He was one of the better characters in the story. I'll give him that.
Good. So, all right. So I'm gonna talk about my second read here, which is something that if I had read the first volume of this, I would not have ordered the second volume before it had been solicited. But this is Coins of Judas the Gambler. This is a 2-issue series from, let's see, actually it's Coins of Judas Band of Bards, the Gambler Part 1 and 2. But the premise behind this book is you have these two siblings who are responsible for tracking down the 30 pieces of silver that Judas was paid for the betrayal of Christ, which I thought was a super interesting concept. Apparently, all 30 of these silver coins have been possessed by some type of demon, and if the coin is out, then the demon is out. So they're basically trying to bring all this evil, under control. However, the first 2 issues were very lackluster, and really nothing improves on the basic premise here. This time they just have to go to the United States. Here in this, I guess the one thing that's new is we learned that they're not the only ones that are hunting for these coins. In fact, they meet somebody who at one point had a coin, but their coin was stolen from them. And it actually goes into some. They go into like near Las Vegas, so they go into the desert, into some indigenous American areas, and then so there's some ties with mythology related to indigenous Americans. So, but again, I don't get to spend more time on it because I'm not. There's going to be more stories coming out. I'm not planning on picking any of them up because it's just been a little lackluster for me. So
Yeah, I
so that's
agree.
Coins of Judas, Band of Bards.
I agree that the premise sounded good, but that's
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I didn't think they executed on it very well. So
yeah.
all
Okay.
right, back to you, Mike.
All right, take the hand off. And what we have here is another single issue, and I'm going to show you the cover, Mr. Scott. See if you understand what the
Ooh,
significance.
Quasar.
Yeah, number
Oh, you
17.
got all the speedsters.
Yeah.
All the speedsters. Okay.
And
Yeah.
Scott's one of those few people that really know that I'm a big fan of unofficial crossovers.
Ah. Okay.
So I ran across someone mentioning this online, and I'm like, I've got to find this. I got to see what they're talking about. It features an unofficial appearance by Barry Allen, the Flash, and this Quasar number 17 was published in 1990, written by Mark Grunwald, which, if anybody knows him, he's big. He was always a big fanboy, and he loved, as even though he was always a Marvel uh, employee, and he created the Squadron Supreme. He did a lot of stuff with Marvel. He grew up as a fan of the Silver Age DC, and Mike Manley did the art chores. So what we have here is this character, and sometimes I should have to say, Scott, I don't know this character. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about him. But the runner is a speedster. I think he's like one of the, not an Eternal,
One of
but
the
like an Elder or something. Or
Yeah, he's an Elder of the Galaxy, like with Champion and Grandmaster and let's see, Champion, Grandmaster. Oh my gosh, Collector. Oh, there's well, they at one point they all had Infinity Stones, so there's 6 of them,
oh, okay,
right? And that's so if you read Thanos Quest, this is like high concept. It becomes high concept Jim Starlin stuff, where Thanos has to get the Infinity Stones from these from these Elders of the Universe.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I guess maybe there's only 5 since Adam Warlock had
And
them.
he's like all in
Yeah,
gold. He reminded me of like a Silver Surfer character. Um,
yeah.
but anyway, he's like the first person you see here. He's challenging Earth's fastest heroes and villains to a race.
Race.
Um,
Yep.
he starts by forcing Makari, another speedster, which I think is an Eternal.
That is
Um,
Makari's an Eternal.
yeah, and and he basically advertises for other speedsters to come and take part in this competition to see who truly is the fastest speedster in the Marvel universe. That includes the aforementioned Makari, but also the Wizard from the Squadron Supreme,
Hmm.
not the Golden Age Wizard. You got Quicksilver, we all know
Hmm.
him. Super Saber, not sure about that one. Um,
Super Saber. Yeah, I don't know Super Saber. Okay.
um, Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel, but
Okay.
she's kind of like Superman in that her speed is mostly flying, not running. You got Black
Right. Yeah.
Racer, which I thought there was only the Fourth World Black Racer,
Fourth World. Yeah.
but this
Okay.
is a Marvel one. And Speed
Wow.
Demon,
Okay.
which that sounds like amalgam character Speed Demon. Remember they combined the demon and wait, who
Ghost
did
Rider.
Ghost Rider? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, anyway, they all, he gets them all, and the runner constructs like this tube that runs from the Earth to the Moon, and they get ready, get set, go. Captain Marvel, she's disqualified because she ended up flying instead of running. You can't.
Hmm.
You your feet have to touch the ground at regular intervals. Um, and while the others are racing, another participant suddenly shows up wearing colors that will be familiar to any DC reader. They, even though he starts from way behind, he winds up overtaking anyone. He's clad in like this tattered yellow and red uniform that's just barely enough for you to know that that is the Flash's uniform. Even the yellow part is you can tell, meant to be lightning on the belt.
Hmm.
But he only remembers his name as Buried Alien, or as he says, or something like that. So he's got amnesia, and it's clearly an homage to Barry Allen, DC's Flash, who died while running in the
Crisis 8.
Crisis. Yeah. So, but what really got me is the quote that he gives. That he didn't die. The implication is that he didn't die. He came across the company Dimensional Divide to Marvel. And as a further nod, the runner asks Buried what it feels like to be the fastest man alive, with all that emphasis. And if anyone knows that, that's like the tagline for the Flash
Yeah.
is fastest man alive. And Barry goes, "It feels right." So apparently, Buried Alien does go on to stay in the Marvel Universe as a character called Fast Forward, and I don't know for how long, but he's goes on other adventures with the runner to go race elsewhere. But yeah, it was a complete indulgence project by Grunwald. There was really no point to the story other than just to have Grunwald get in Barry Allen into a Marvel book, which I thought was just charming as heck. I loved it. A left field tribute to the Flash, and if you remember, he just died 5 years earlier. So, and back then, characters actually did stay dead for a while. So, thumbs
Well,
up
I
on
guess
that
maybe
one
that
too.
explains part of when he was running in Crisis. That's maybe part of where he went to.
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
part of that
right.
random run.
Yeah,
So yeah.
right. Like he didn't actually disintegrate and die. He ended up crossing that divide.
Okay. Well, I think I said whenever I was going to order this book in one of our previews that this was going to be like my last. I wanted to see if Kieran Gillen could, write something that had a definite start and end point, so that way he wouldn't get the chance to meander as much. So what I've got here is the graphic novel. We called them Giants. This is from the same team that did Die, which was that kind of grown up Dungeons and Dragons Saturday morning cartoon story. But so it's written by Kieran Gillen, art by Stephanie Hans, letters by Clayton Cowles, and basically the premise is this girl wakes up one morning to find everybody that she knows is gone. So it's kind of like this Rapture-esque event. So she happens to bump into this other girl that is somewhere in her neighborhood, and they are basically forced to kind of join together to survive. There's a group of some other individuals who have kind of teamed up. They call themselves the Dogs, and you have all these. You have the Dogs, and then this small group of two. They're out there trying to, compete for the resources that are available. Well, so where the giants come into play is that this large, and I don't know how to explain this, just this unearthly looking giant creature shows up, which of course terrifies them for the most part. But basically, these giants basically ignore all the people. All right, so they're just kind of out there. So they initially are just going to stay away from these giants. Well, comes to find out, as the weather changes, things get colder. There's all of these large, gigantic wolves that are starting to make attacks on individuals. They learn that if they move closer to one of these two giants, the wolves won't actually attack them. Well, in this process of moving closer to the wolves, they meet up with this older lady who is a survivor as well. So, I mean, there's maybe you probably see less than 20 people throughout the entire book, and most of them are just masked individuals that are part of the Dogs. But what ultimately happens is they get pulled in to this almost like a cave where one of the giants is staying. They kind of feel like they're trapped, but they are able eventually to get out. And it's kind of weird. I guess it's just more of it's just really just told to be a story. It doesn't necessarily have to have, some type of I don't know. I'm sure it has some meaning for the writer, but ultimately what happens is these two giants. One of the girls basically runs into the wolves and the other giant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the one giant that they have been with previously then goes and defends the girl from the wolves and ultimately kills the other giant. But when in the process, then their giant also dies. So I really don't know what else to say about it. It was interesting, and I like the Stephanie Hahn's artwork in this, and I guess she did the colors as well because she just has the art credit. So I like the look and the art for this book, and it's very reminiscent of what Die was, and that was a story that I loved, and basically until about issue 15, and then it just kept getting sloppier and sloppier.
It's a hardback you got there, hardcover.
So yeah, well, this is the only one. So this is all that's out at this point. It's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to recommend this because it's one of those things where it doesn't feel like it went anywhere.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. So it was a nice story for what it was. It's not super long, and it's nice for Kieran Gillen to not have the chance to ramble and lose sight of, what the story is supposed to be about. I guess
He had guardrails. He had
yeah. So so I don't know. So I guess the big takeaway is that if I get, I'm not going to just discount the next Kieran Gillen story. Because we've talked about Once and Future started strong, fizzled out. Die started strong, fizzled out. So I'm hoping that self-contained might be the way for him to go moving forward. So.
Okay.
All right, Mike, back to you.
Okay. Well, I have The One Hand to talk about next. Did you read that?
I did not.
Okay, so it's going to be, this is a tough one to explain. not just because it's a deep plot, but it is. I'm only
Ram V,
getting.
right?
I'm only. What's that?
It's Ram V, right?
It's Ram V. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Ram V and Lawrence Campbell,
Okay.
and it's hard to explain. Partly because I'm only getting half the story. I really think that I should have gotten the Six Fingers, which is its companion piece. These I don't think these are really meant to be read separately. I think you can read them separately, but I'm missing out on some good stuff, I think. So basically it's I'm so used to saying the not so distant future, but this is the distant future. This is 2873. And we're in the city of Neo Novena, which is very London like, based on landmarks and stuff. And you got this detective named Ari Nasser, who is about to retire with a good record, and he's put away a particular murderer. But then the signature murders that this guy he put away was responsible for start occurring again. They don't think it's a copycat. That happened once already. I think they put away the guy twice, or at least two people. I'm not really sure. It's really strange, but it's the new murders basically convince him to not retire. He is so obsessed with the cat and mouse game. He's consumed with it to pursue the who did it, not just who did it, but why or how. That he delays his retirement. So at all the murder scenes, there are these ciphers on the walls left behind. There are really a whole lot of questions asked without a whole lot of answers. Why are these killings happening? Why is it still happening when he put this guy in prison twice before? And it involves AI. It involves, we're talking about 800 years in the future, 750 or so at least. And AI is a way of life. You have synthesoid, how do you say it? Synthetic creatures there that serve as both a version of prostitutes and as companions. You have AI everywhere. But yet it's very dark. It's not like your bright and you know bright colored future that you might see in a sci-fi flick. It's very dark. The way the art is by Lawrence Campbell, it's done well, but there's a lot of blacks. It's a very deep, very psychological story, and I like to say whether it's thumbs up. It was thumbs up in a way, but I really I feel like there's unfinished business that I need to go back and read. Not just read the Six Fingers, but you're supposed to alternate. I think read issue 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's that. I think Ram V is one of the better writers of our day. It's just sometimes some writers kind of go over my head.
Well, I would have disagreed with that statement until I read the first issue of New Gods, and then
Right.
now I can kind of get into him being one of the top writers.
Yeah.
So
Well, did you like the many deaths of Layla Starr, or did you?
I just thought it was okay.
Yeah.
I was a little indifferent. I was
Yeah.
and like even like his detective
Yeah, I
run.
wasn't a
I
big
read
fan of
his
that. That was
detective
too
run,
long. Yeah.
and it was fine, and it's how what I describe. Well, if you're a Batman fan, you won't leave the book for it, but there's not really a big reason to pick up the book
True.
for it either.
Right.
So that's kind of how I viewed his run on Detective was that way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, back to you.
Okay, so this is a book I only picked up because I was going to a convention last year, and Afua Richardson was going to be one of the guests at the convention. So this is actually Top Cow period, or they used to do this series called Pilot Season, and what they would do is they would release like 4 books, and whichever of the 4 books had the most sales was supposed to get picked up for an ongoing series. So, to my knowledge, this was not the book that was picked up, but this is Pilot Season Genius. It is written by Mark Bernardine and Adam Freeman with the art by Afua Richardson. So, again, I bought this just so I could get that Afua Richardson signature on the. It's kind of hard to see with the gold on the
I see it.
on the
Yeah.
dark skin, but there you go. We
Yeah.
get the reflection on it. So I had this signed by Afua Richardson, but this was written in 2008 is when this was released.
Wow.
Now tell me if this doesn't sound a little prophetic. So you have a neighborhood that decides they no longer want to be under police protection, so they basically barricade their neighborhood in, and when the cops come in to try to clear them out, they basically kill the cops that are coming in. All right, so does that sound like anything that's happened in the last few years in the United States to you?
It does.
Okay, all right. So that's kind of the basic premise of this book. So you have, and I'm trying to remember the main character's name, but oh goodness gracious, that's what Like you said, I'm not good about taking notes. I kind of just like to just kind of like flip through the pages and talk about what jumps into my brain at the time. But it's a predominantly black neighborhood. I know that Afua Richardson is black. I'm assuming, and you know what happens when you assume, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Mark Bernardine and Adam Freeman are also black, but I don't know that for a fact. So it's probably a mistake on my part for making that type of an assumption. But and I just noticed that on the cover it has a URL that includes myspace.com/pilot season. So that is quite hilarious.
Yeah.
But okay, I cannot find the protagonist's name, but she is basically the one that is leading this neighborhood, and she's basically becoming I'll just call it a general for this particular area, and that they are going to take care of their own, and they do not want interference from the police. So the police, obviously, they're not too hip on that, so they bring in SWAT teams and such to try to put an end to this, and they are unable to stop them. So this is, I think I said 4 books. It's actually, apparently it's 6 books inner, 2 books leave. So you read, you vote, take control. Apparently 4.1 million voted in the year prior to this for pilot season. So like I said, as far as I know, this book wasn't picked up. It's to me, this is kind of like when I went and watched The Joker. It's a good film, but I'm never going to watch that again.
Mm-mm.
And I feel like this, because there's not really any hero. Both sides neither one of them is really doing right. And
And
so there's
that
nobody
sticks
to
in your
root
craw. I
for.
know that you don't really like ambiguous right and wrong or good and bad. Yeah.
I want somebody to root for,
Right.
and so this is kind of like that. So, but I had to get this properly bagged and boarded, so I needed to get it out of my stack of stuff that I've had set aside to talk about, so that I can get it filed away, because I am going to keep it because of the Afua Richardson signature. So.
I don't blame you.
Yep. Back to you, Mike.
Okay,
How many more do you want to do?
That was 4. I've got one more, but it can wait.
Okay.
It can wait.
Oh no,
Okay.
go ahead. I didn't know if you wanted to do 2 or 3 more, or
Oh
how
no,
many more you wanted
this is
to
all I'm
do.
prepared for, and
Oh,
I
okay.
have to prepare. I just sound like a complete buffoon. So what we have here is, I was on a streak there buying a lot of Marvel. Those, I want to call them miniseries, but it's kind of like the norm these days. Just everything
Yep.
from Rogue and Gambit to what's her name, Patsy Walker, Hellcat.
Hellcat.
I've got that one. It's up there ready for me to read tonight, or at least part of it.
Hmm.
And then Daredevil and Echo, which is the subject of my last review here, and it's it came out just last year or 2 years ago, 2023, written by Taboo, who apparently is really Jaime Gomez of the Black Eyed Peas. I didn't know he was a comic writer. And a guy named B. Earl, a.k.a. Benjamin Jackendoff. They're the writers and the art inside, inside and out. I've never seen any Phil Noto interior art. I've seen him do a lot of covers, but he has done the interiors here. So you've got a villain called the Demoglobin. Is that pronounced right?
Uh,
Demoglobin?
uh,
Goblin?
Demagoblin. Yeah, because it's like the
Oh,
hobgoblin,
oh
but
yeah, I put the
Demogoblin.
L in the wrong
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a Demogoblin. Um, Basically been kidnapping children for reasons unknown to, uh, well, I guess it can't be reasons unknown if I have here that he's going to wake an ancient and powerful evil in the bowels of the city. But that's what he's doing, and then Daredevil Echo with a guest star, Ghost Rider, to deal with him. And this has sort of got parallel storylines. You've got similar stories going on in 1835, so almost 200 years before, involving the ancestors of both Matt Murdock and Echo. And they're back then they're battling a demon under Hell's Kitchen, and this demon is the same demon is showing up now in the current times, and they have to face it. Uh, Daredevil Daredevil's ancestor, which I forget his name. He's a Murdoch, of course, but
Mhm.
he looks like something from Gangs of New York. He's uh, he trusts in this Native American woman, which is Echo's ancestor. To get to the bottom of it, they both this, which is I thought was interesting. First, I got to ask you this mark on Echo's face with the handprint. Is that a
Mhm.
birthmark or what is that?
I just think it's like okay. I hope I am not misspeaking in any shape, form, or fashion. But so Echo is Indigenous American.
Yeah.
Her name is Maya Lopez,
Yeah.
and I believe it's a
Okay.
tribal symbol.
Okay.
So it's like basically paint put on
So
the
that makes more
face.
sense because if it
Yes.
was a birthmark, I thought, well, the ancestor has the same symbol, and I thought, okay, that's a little bit too contrived to say, oh yeah, that's
Right. Yeah.
my great 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 grandma. She just had the same birthmark. So if it's a
Yeah.
symbol that they deliberately put on her face, then I get it. Okay,
Yes.
so um, it's it's kind of it's you've kind of been there, done that type feel to it. I didn't dislike this story. It's 4 issues. It went just fine, and the Noto art really helped. But it had some annoying mistakes, which once I see a mistake, I can't unsee it. I mean, especially when you're dealing with a character like Echo, who has this very distinctive characteristic in that she's deaf, and
Deaf. Yep.
but she's in part of the story. She's able to have this conversation without facing Ghost Rider.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then later he has to spell out the words in flame, and because
Right.
she can't read his lips, um, or can't read his lipless face, I should say.
There you go. Yeah.
So, yeah, just mistakes like that. Maybe just you can call it
Uh-huh.
rookie mistakes for Taboo. I don't know how rookie he is, but he's a musician, I guess originally. But there's a lot of creative. You notice creative people. They can cross over into other areas.
Uh-huh.
Um, the old timey Irish accent doesn't feel accurate, but maybe it's because it's from the 1830s. So I'm like, I don't know if that's it just seemed off. But I did like Noto's rendition of Daredevil. He's realistic looking. He's got this slightly baggy costume, or at least the pants. It's more
Hmm.
comfortable. I mean, I don't.
It might just be more like it's supposed to be representative like leather,
Oh,
so
I
that
got you.
it's more protective than like spandex
Yeah.
would be.
Okay.
So
That it
I
makes
that's
perfect
if I'm
sense.
remembering
Yeah.
correctly.
And that's it for me. This is a wash. I'm not going to recommend it or not
Yeah.
recommend it.
No.
It was there. I read it. I'm not going to bed mad after I've read it. I just I need to. I like. I've as much as you echoes your, if not your favorite, one of
Hmm.
your favorite characters. And
Echo is my favorite modern age
okay, after
character.
Captain
So a
Marvel's
character
the
that has
old.
been
Yeah, right.
released in the modern
Gotcha.
age. You know.
But I wanted to read something with that character and get a little bit more knowledge about her because all my only exposure to her was on the Daredevil or on the series, the Echo series.
Series.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. So
Yes.
good stuff in that way. But it
Yeah.
it just not the absolutely best story in the world.
No. Okay, so I want to follow up with you on that series. Your evaluation of that series is 100% spot on.
Oh, you've read it
All
then?
right.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
I have read that series. It's been I think I was reading it shortly after it finished.
yeah.
Like it came out last year or was it 2023?
2023,
When did it
yeah,
come out?
yeah,
Okay, all right. So I read it shortly after it came out. Yeah, they choose it. To me, it's like the same. They have the same problem with Echo that they have with like uh, uh, um, Cassandra Cain.
oh yeah,
Where they have these certain ways that they are supposed to communicate. Even going back to like muteness in Daredevil,
mm-hmm.
the writers couldn't handle it, so they moved away from it, right?
Right,
So you know, Echoes, is supposed to be, treated a particular way. At this point, I believe she has the Phoenix Force in that series. I don't know if I can't remember how much they played in on that though, but yeah, they
yeah,
basically ignored her deafness in that series
yeah,
completely.
yeah,
So I prefer the street level Maya Lopez over the Phoenix Force,
yeah.
Maya Lopez myself. But yeah, your analysis on that is 100% accurate. So
Well, that's good to know because I'm hoping I'm not missing something. I'm sure there's way better Echo stories out there.
yeah. Well, you need to start with Daredevil 9 through 14,
Yeah.
which is her first appearance.
Okay.
All right, which is
Who wrote those?
uh, David Mack,
Okay.
I believe, wrote. Oh, okay. I know because David Mack created Echo, or so I think I can't remember if he wrote and drew or just drew. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that right now.
Well.
But yeah, that's absolutely an incredible Echo story,
Okay.
and that's the reason why I love that character is from that story.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, so that's the one that you need to read, and it's like I said, 9, 10. 10's her first cover, 9's her first appearance. 10, it's probably 5 issues, so 11, 12, and 13
Yeah.
is probably her first story arc. Um, Absolutely, uh, really really good. You get her origin, her ties to the Kingpin, and all that
Yeah.
in that story. So that's the story to read for Echo. So
Okie doke.
all right. So speaking of Cassandra Cain, I've been reading Batgirl, and since this is my last book, I'm gonna save talking about Batgirl until maybe the next time we do what we've been reading. But a character that when we were doing previews a few months ago, a character that was showing up multiple times, like in Black Canary and in Batgirl, was Lady Shiva.
Yeah.
So of course, Lady Shiva is Cassandra Cain's mother. Am I? I got that right?
Oh yeah.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I just like for some reason I keep thinking that's Batwoman, not. But okay, no, that's Batgirl. Okay.
Different
Thank you.
different spelling of Kane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but anyway, so it's like you know what? I have the first appearance of Cassandra Cain, and I've enjoyed pretty much every single Lady Shiva story that I've ever read. So I thought, you know what? I need to pick up her first appearance.
Oh, you dog.
So I picked up CGC 80 of Richard Dragon, Kung Fu Fighter number 5. But coincidentally, in another collection that I had bought, I got not one, but two relatively beat up copies of Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter number 5. So since that one was graded, I couldn't open it up and read it, but I had the rough copy here because, like, okay, I probably have read this at some point in the past, but like I said, to me, there's a lot of similarities between Lady Shiva and Talia al Ghul. Now, I don't know if a deep dive into the characters, if that would stay be accurate, but they kind of have the same skill set
Yeah.
and the likes. So that to me they're very similar, but I like I said, I've enjoyed the stuff like in Batgirl. I think actually how Lady Shiva is written is more interesting than how Cassandra Cain is being written, just because of they've opened up her speech patterns and stuff in the series. And I think that's just
Yeah.
reflective on the writers. But so anyway, basically it starts off with Lady Shiva, is just, and you don't know that's who it is. I mean, you have her on the cover, obviously, and then you have her on the very first splash page. But then it's a masked or a hooded fighter that defeats a bunch of other martial artists, and then Richard Dragon's going to go in and investigate something. So he teams up with somebody, Sandra Wusan. All right. Well, then he, goes and meditates and becomes the dragon, and they're off to, invade this base of this, I guess, crime boss who was overseeing all the fighting at the beginning. So then, Lady, the hooded figure, which at this point you don't realize that it's a woman. All right, steps into the ring. Well, it's actually also Sandra Wusan, who was the person who was, there with Richard Dragon. So there's some ties to a character in one of the previous, I guess, 4 issues of Richard Dragon named Carolyn. So it's because this is supposed to be Carolyn's sister. So I guess this Sandra Wusan thinks that Richard Dragon caused the death of the sister, but in fact, actually, it was somebody else. But to me, the weird thing in this story is that they stop calling this character Sandra, and it's just like between panels, it's no longer, it says Sandra Shiva, we have no quarrel. It's like, why are you suddenly calling her Shiva?
Huh.
She doesn't say my real name is Shiva. She just, Richard Dragon just says, Sandra, Shiva, we have no quarrel. And listen to me, Shiva. So that was just weird.
Yeah, that's clunky.
But,
yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to point that out. But the character is a martial artist, and I think the character has more depth now. It's one of those things where you introduce the character, and has a lot more going on for it. But I really thought this was going to be pretty terrible because I remember like people talking super highly, and I may get in trouble with a few people for saying this, but Master of Kung Fu, the Shang-Chi Master of Kung Fu series, I read that entire run.
Yeah.
That was not very good.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I was expecting this to be pretty comparable to that, and I'm surprised that I actually enjoyed this issue of Richard Dragon more than I enjoyed the original Shang-Chi Master of Kung Fu run.
And they're from the same era, the mid-'70s. That looks like 75, 76 maybe.
From the exact
Who's the writer, Scott? Is it Michelini?
So the Denny O'Neil.
Okay.
Rick Estrada and Wally Wood art.
Wally Wood art,
Giordano cover. So
see now.
Yeah. So
my memories
December 1975.
Okay, my memories of that. In fact, when you brought that up, when I seen that you had read that recently, and we started talking about the first appearance of Lady Shiva, I'm like, well, I've got that because I've got a bunch of those. There's only like 15 issues. I think I got the entire run.
7.
Oh, maybe 7. Well, that's what I was conflating that and Karate Kid. And Karate Kid was absolutely horrendous. So I think I was, whenever you were like, I was like, oh, Richard Dragon? And it turns out I don't have that issue, and I hope to purchase it from someone soon. But
well, I think somebody has it for you in their bag just to give to you. So.
Oh man! Oh, happy.
Well,
dance.
like I said, it's a little rough. It's a little rough.
Oh,
so.
Hey, I'm not in it for anything else. Any.
There you go. So.
That's cool. I as a point of note, Lady Shiva is highlighted in the ongoing. Well, by ongoing, I mean it's going on right now. It's not
Black Canary.
Black Canary, Best of the Best. Yeah, she's the opponent. She's known to be in the DC universe in the top 5 fighters in the world, and of course the Best of the Best is all about Black Canary. Oh,
and she's also in Batgirl.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she is.
The ongoing Batgirl series right now. So Lady Shiva is very prominent in the DC universe.
Now, when you compare her to Talia, I'd say that is a good comparison there. I'd also say she compares even more closely to Cheshire of the Teen Titans fame.
Okay.
Same kind of background, same. They were assassins, and you know, yeah.
Doesn't Chesser have some direct tie to? Does she have a direct tie to Lady Shiva or a direct tie? I think she has a direct tie to Lady Shiva.
Oh, I don't know.
She trained under her, I
Could be,
think, or
could be.
something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I haven't read it. I mean, she's known mostly for being a Titans villain, but also being the lover of Roy Harper, Speedy,
Hmm.
and they sired or they had a child together named I believe Leon, and who died some years ago in a Justice League book, but then came back. But she's yeah, which and then she's actually Cheshire's actually been in some of the Green Arrow books as well, along with the daughter Leon.
According to this is according to the a wiki entry. Cheshire is considered the second most deadly assassin
Oh,
after Lady Shiva, who is the most deadly assassin. So let me see if I can find that where it actually said that here. Okay, in Birds of Prey 63, Black Canary, referring to Cheshire, calls her the second most deadly assassin in the world, only topped by Lady Shiva.
yeah. Okay.
And then in Aquaman and the Outsiders #11, Cheshire is called the most dangerous woman alive. So, which that's I think kind of a takeoff of Gamora from Marvel. But
Oh, right.
that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
but let's see where. Man, I thought that there was some connection between those two, but maybe I'm just making up something, or they may have injected that into the Young Justice series.
Maybe.
And that's probably what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it makes me want to go and
something
read
else.
all the appearances of both of them. Oh my gosh. I'll go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, don't. That would take too long. So
Cheshire was known not just for her fighting, but she had the poisonous claws.
claws,
Yeah.
yeah. No, yeah. That's what. Like I said, I know Cheshire from Young Justice primarily.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. So okay, Mike. So what's been going on the road show?
Well, we just got, after some delays, had a lot of going on this fall and winter, but I finally got episode 24 out, and that is featuring Ace Comics in Essex, in Colchester, Essex, in England. And the book that is featured is Flake, which is a standalone graphic novel, which gets it gets one of the highest ratings of any of the books that's been reviewed on the show. George from Meanwhile at the podcast joined me. We both enjoyed it very much. It was a long time coming to get this one out, and I do have 3 more in the queue, so we won't have a 2-month delay again. Not gonna let that happen.
All right, good deal. So, all right. So if you want to reach out to Mike or I, you can do that at podcasts@bergcomics.com. I believe what we have coming up on episode 203 is previews, right?
Should
So
be,
that
yeah.
Be our next episode. Yeah, I'll be.
Unless you want to mention, we'll be taking part in the Fire and Water Network podcast network, the JSApril event.
Okay.
We'll be covering a 5-issue run storyline in JSA. You should be hearing more about that very soon.
Yeah, and possibly even at the end of this episode, if you stay all the way to the end, you might hear a little teaser about that event.
There you go, folks.
All right. So, Mike, if somebody wanted to reach out to you besides podcast@birdcomics.com, how might they go about doing that?
Well, if I were them, I would first try Mike at comicshoproadshow.com email address. You can also hit me up on Blue Sky, or if it's just a quick note, get on Facebook and go to the Campus Comics Cast page and just throw out your notes to us, and we always respond.
That's right. So, and it's always nice to not think you're living in your own echo chamber. So
Yeah.
always that, even just a little
Yeah.
a brief comment, it is so appreciated. I got so excited at the last show I did in Evansville when again I had 2 people come up to me and wasn't even advertising for the podcast at that show, and I had 2 people come up to me and say, "Hey, listen to the podcast," and it's like, There's somebody out
Yay.
there. While Mike and I think, are perfectly happy to sit here and talk to each other about comics, you know, it's always nice to know somebody's listening. So
Yeah, it's very gratifying. Yeah, it's
That's
great.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at burgcomics.com, BURG comics.com, which has links to my social media page and eBay store. And as part of my New Year's resolution related to comics, I've been trying to move more comics and get more stuff listed. So I'm up to like over 600 listings up on eBay at the current time. So if you're listening to this podcast and look at my eBay store and you see something that you like, don't feel obligated to buy it through eBay. You can just send me a message directly, and I would be happy to kind of get you my best price on that particular book. So, and we'll be back soon with episode 203, X-Men.
Clear out. Yeah, me too. Yes. Remember where your mute button is. Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. Did you listen to the end of that one episode? Yes. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's actually better. It's better when it's... I didn't even speed it up or something. I just left it as it was. Alright. Okay, so...
Back in 1940, 8 sensational heroes united to create the world's very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. Now, 85 years later, we're gathering podcasters and bloggers from around the globe for a month-long celebration in an event we're calling JSApril. Throughout April 2025, join dozens of content creators as they each share their own unique tributes to the original and greatest superhero team, including all-star podcasters and bloggers like
Justice Society presents
the Longbox Crusade podcast,
Campus Comics Cast.
Supergirl Comic Box Commentary,
the Quarter Bin Podcast,
The Bat Pod,
The Earth 2 Podcast, FW Team Up,
Diana Prince is the new Wonder Woman,
Fanholes Podcast,
Back to the Bins,
Coffee and Comics,
The Huntress Podcast,
*51.blogspot.com,
Justice Society Origins, a part of John Reed's Comics,
DC Specialcast,
Between the Pages blog,
The Outcasters, a Batman and the Outsiders podcast,
A World on Fire and All-Star Squadron podcast,
JLA Stories and Friends,
The Monitor Tapes,
a Crisis on Infinite Earths podcast,
Lords of Order, a DC's Dr. Fate fan podcast,
David M. Gallagher at Medium.com,
JSA in the 90s,
Justice League Legacies,
DC Secret Files podcast,
Mike's Geek World,
Pop Culture Affidavit,
The Source Material Comics podcast,
That Giffen Show,
Worst Collection Ever,
The Fantastic Four.
It all comes back to Superman.
And that's just some of the podcasters and bloggers who'll be joining in the celebration. Get ready for a thrilling month of beloved characters, fascinating insights, and incredible stories. Follow the action on social media with the hashtag JSApril, and visit our website for a complete list of participating podcasters, bloggers, and what they're each covering at fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril.